Right, so there's been an almighty kerfuffle in Rochdale since last night with the Rochdale by-election, as news has dropped, albeit by the fail on Sunday, so caveats for the poor source. However, what has transpired since does appear to bear out what they've said. Labour's candidate there, Azhar Ali, has made past comments in line with the Egyptian version of events leading up to the night of October 7th in Israel and Gaza, and not towed the Israeli line about such matters, and that Zionist without qualification, Keir Starmer, can't have that. There are somewhat mixed messages about what has already been done about this by the party, but with Ali reportedly on a train to London as I was writing this to meet with Starmer, is Starmer about to throw the Rochdale by-election for the sake of Israel, or is he merely using that as an excuse because he's already lost it to George Galloway? Right, so what's happened then, Damo? Well, if you aren't already familiar with this story, which somewhat dominated Sunday morning's politics discussions, then what we're looking at is either the final nail in the coffin of Labour's campaign to hold on to the seat of Rochdale, or it's Labour's excuse for basically admitting defeat, but it can't be Starmer's fault. It has to be the candidate. And the candidate, Azhar Ali, for all his faults, is being hung out to dry for basically agreeing with Egypt's version of events leading up to October 7th, and not the dross Israel came out with, which is about as close to the truth as Keir Starmer is to keeping his policies. Now, I spoke about Egypt's explanation for how things escalated going into October 7th previously. As regular viewers know, I've covered the events in the Middle East closely since October 7th. I think we in the West have a responsibility to do that against that backdrop of mainstream media excuses, and especially as we're seeing the genocide play out across social media. But Egypt, who have for a long time acted as mediators between Israel and Hamas, warned Israel that Hamas were building up to something ahead of October 7th, and instead of shoring up their defences, Israel appears to have basically allowed it to happen. They denied they knew anything about this, about anything about to kick off. Egypt have basically called them out for that, basically calling them liars. But the Israeli forces downgraded defences. They, in light of everything we've seen since, right up to virtually the entire surviving population of Gaza now being pinned down in Rafah with nowhere left to go. It seems Israel likely let October 7th happen as an excuse to do what they've done since. The takeover of Gaza, the elimination of Hamas, all the civilian deaths that's cost, new settlements potentially springing up as they take Gaza over afterwards, all things Benjamin Netanyahu's mad hard-right coalition partners desire. Ali apparently told a meeting of the Lancashire Labour Party that the Egyptians are saying they warned Israel 10 days earlier. Americans warned them the day before that. There's something happening. They deliberately took the security off. They allowed that massacre that gives them the green light to do whatever they bloody want. Now, Ali is himself a Muslim. You can appreciate that might have been genuine anger in his casual admittance of what is far, far more believable than anything Israel has said. But of course it'll never wash in the Labour Party of Keir Starmer, and he wants to be an MP, and as such an apology quickly followed the release of his previous comments. Ali said, "I apologise unreservedly to the Jewish community for my comments which were deeply offensive, ignorant and false. Hamas's horrific terror attack was the responsibility of Hamas alone, and they are still holding hostages who must be released. October 7th was the greatest loss of Jewish life in a single day since the Holocaust, and Jews in the UK and across the world are living in fear of the rising anti-Semitism. I will urgently apologise to Jewish leaders for my inexcusable comments. The Labour Party has changed unrecognisably under Keir Starmer's leadership. He has my full support in delivering the change Britain needs." Which Jewish community? Many agreed with what you said to start with. Were the events of October 7th entirely Hamas's doing when Israeli gunships were conveniently ready to be deployed and were seen killing people fleeing the Nova Music Festival, along with the Hannibal directives that multiple eyewitnesses claim to have seen enacted to kill their own citizens rather than see them taken hostage? October 7th was the greatest loss of Jewish life since the Holocaust, but that doesn't get away from the fact that so many more people have been killed in Gaza, which nobody ever seems to acknowledge. Ali would have won some plaudits if he'd stood by his words, I'm sure. Instead, he put himself first, his aspirations first, and all he's actually ended up achieving is turning even more people off him, and likely towards the Galloway campaign as a result. He's already stopped campaigning in Muslim areas, such as the anger he's faced there, and that demographic is one vote in every 3 in Rochdale. Labour are defending a 9,000 vote majority there, and right now it's looking decidedly ropey. They'll hang on to the seat, which moves the story on somewhat to what happens next. Now, as things stand at time of writing, Ali remains the candidate for Labour. He said all of this, an apology has been sufficient, yet compare that to the recent case of Kate Ossamore, left-wing SCG MP who dared acknowledge the Gaza genocide on Holocaust Memorial Day. She issued a Labour whip-induced apology, which she was told would be sufficient. However, she was later suspended and probably now won't be allowed to stand in the general election in defence of her seat. Ali being allowed to stand still in the light of his comments, so, well, hypocrisy just doesn't seem a big enough word, does it? Leaving Ali in place makes it blatantly obvious that Labour are letting his comments slide purely for their own ends. At a time when Labour are leading massively in national polls, the fact they are looking likely to either lose this seat with that large majority, despite it, or cling on to it by the fingernails, is shambolic and makes those national polling figures look mad, which I think they probably are. However, I've been made aware this morning that Ali is apparently on a train bound for London with a meeting with Keir Starmer. Now, if Starmer were to be consistent for a change, he'd suspend Azhar Ali over his comments. I don't agree that he's wrong, but this is Starmer we're talking about. If he's going to be consistent as he was with Kate Ossamore, you can see him doing the same thing here. Quite why he needs to go to London for that and speak to Starmer himself, though, I don't see the point of that, unless something more is going on. Starmer might want to let him in on what is actually going on behind his impending suspension, perhaps. You see, Labour are looking right now at losing what should be a safe seat to George Galloway. Embarrassing doesn't quite cover that. Suspending their candidates, though, and saying, well, they can simply say, well, we picked a wrong un, even though he's only a wrong un in their opinion because he told the truth. But when that truth goes against the Zionist grain, it can't be allowed to stand in Starmer's Labour. They save face, Starmer gets to pretend he's strong on anti-Semitism, but in actual fact he's just bending to Israel's will. He'd be suspending a candidate and losing a seat for the sake of Israel. Ali told the truth. He echoed Egypt's claims at the very beginning of this latest assault on Gaza. There's no incentive for them to lie. And if that doesn't show a truly scary level of obeisance to Netanyahu's regime, I don't know what does. That'll be the biggest example to my mind of where his loyalties truly lie, so far seen. And the media and the mainstream media won't point that out at all. But actually, for what he suspended Kate Ossamore over, he leaves himself completely exposed to that. The seat would undoubtedly go to George Galloway should this happen. But perhaps that's a price worth paying to Starmer's mind short term, because Galloway will, of course, have to defend the seat again at some point later this year. Effectively handing it to Galloway now is less damaging than losing to him, potentially winning it back off him if and when Galloway ends up using the seat as a vehicle for himself rather than serving Rochdale. Starmer will be damned as even more of Israel's man than ever if he suspends Azhar Ali and faces an embarrassing defeat if he doesn't. He's damned either way. People need to realise it as the mainstream instead sell him as taking strong action on racism, which is just ridiculous. He just weaponises it. Egypt warned Israel in advance of October 7th, and if you would like more detail on the basis of Azhar Ali's comment or to refresh your memory on that, it seems so long ago now, doesn't it, then you should watch this video here next, where I went into more detail on that story, and I'll hopefully catch you on the next vid. Cheers, folks.